Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight as I get to chat with Nefertiti Austin, who I've had the pleasure of chatting with many times over the past few years, including I've assigned her book, which we're going to talk a little bit about tonight, to my class, I think for 4 solid years. And I've reread it every time. And every time I love it and find something new in it that I'm like, wow, this is just really riveting. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, thanks. Well, before we get into really sort of the meat of the evening where we want to talk about race, identity, motherhood, just a little bit about myself and Nefertiti, and then Nefertiti is going to speak a little bit more about also her trajectory towards writing the book. But my name's Erin O'Connor. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Chief of Education here at Cooper. I'm also a professor at New York University, where I head the early childhood program. And really committed to the idea of translating research and practice into ways to support parents as they're going through various journeys, which is really the Cooper mission as well, which we do through various things such as assemblies and talks like tonight, as well as through monthly parenting groups and one-on-one sessions. So you can hear all about us on yourcooper.com. We just went from the beta stage to the real stage this week. So we're super excited about that. Thank you. So Katie, as well as just being an amazing person and contributor, is an author and artist. In her first nonfiction book, Motherhood So White, a memoir of race, gender, and parenting in America, she writes about the erasure of diverse voices in motherhood. Her work around this topic has appeared in many publications, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, Mutha, and Gen Medium. Nefertiti is the adopted mother and daughter in a way of 2 children and lives in Los Angeles, California. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. So, as you mentioned, I'm not formally adopted. I like to describe my family. We were Black adopted, and I'll get into that in a moment. I get asked a lot, like, okay, why did you write the book, and what's your story? How did you get to this moment? And so, I will give you the highlights. My parents were part of the Black Power movement, and eventually, like unfortunately many people in the movement, they both had drug addictions, and so that led to a very unstable beginning for my brother and I. And so we were back and forth between grandparents, and ultimately Black adopted by my mom's parents. And what that essentially means is that it was just an informal arrangement until the elders, like all 4 grandparents, came together and made a decision about where we would who we would live with, and everyone just abided by that. I mean, ultimately, I think my grandparents had to be my legal guardians because they had enrollment in school, that sort of thing. But they bypassed social workers, bypassed lawyers, that sort of thing. And within my family and amongst my friends, my parents were my grandparents. And I didn't know it then, and it honestly wasn't until I think I was writing Motherhood So White that I kind of connected all the dots, though it makes sense to me that my upbringing, I knew that your parents were the people who took care of you. So I wasn't necessarily stuck on that there has to be a certain way to do it, though my grandparents were very conservative, middle class, and the expectation, of course, was that I would get married and have my own children. And I was for that. I was all on that path. And in my mid 20s, when all my girlfriends started getting married, I was like, oh no, I'm not mature enough for that. So fast forward a decade, and I just caught a Mommy Jones, and I was intrigued by all things baby. And it just hit me so hard, and it wouldn't let me go. And what I had in my back pocket was my best friend who was adopted, and she's an adoption social worker. So for years, I've been hearing about all these children in LA County and placements that had been made, things that had been disrupted, the benefits of adoption. And I got to thinking I could do that. And because I was Black adopted, I felt like I turned out okay. And as an adult, I started meeting other Black adults who were adopted as well. And I thought, oh, well, this person turned out okay. You know, maybe I can do that. This would be my community service, my really kind of paying it forward, because I'm an older parent, you know, first child at 37. That makes me an older parent to some degree. And
Oh,
I think
I'm
about
really an older parent.
my second one came, I was 42. So, and I have friends who had babies after that, late 40s, that sort of thing. So I'm not the oldest parent, but I think about like at this age, this is around the age my grandparents were like, oh yeah, we're going, you know, come on, and we're going to love you guys and take care of you and raise you. And I wonder about that. Like, that's really special. That really, that took something, because everyone's not built for that. And I really appreciate that. So my ultimately I think the driving force behind my choosing to adopt as a first means of parenting, it wasn't reproductive issues, it wasn't because I wasn't seeing anyone. It was really just like, there are children who need homes, and I've got a home for at least one of these kids. And so that's how I got to be an adoptive parent.
Well, so, I think there's so much that you talk about, even more than that in your book, right? About this decision to become an adoptive parent. But I think, something also that runs so strongly through the book is raising a Black boy in America, and what that means in terms of your experience as a mom, in terms of, anxiety around sending your child out into the world. And, I want to read a quote because it's at the beginning of your book, and it just really struck me, because I'm one of those parents that really worried about the different approaches to education that, my child was going to be exposed to in pre-K. And then I was just thinking, wow, what if I had other things to worry about than that? So you say, I went from trying to understand the difference between the Montessori and the Reggio Emilia approaches to education to understanding that I was part of a club whose sole membership requirement was being the mother of a Black boy, and feeling the weight of that fear keenly for the first time.
Yeah, that was very unexpected. I mean, I was very intentional about wanting a Black boy. So when you adopt, you're given a form. When you go public adoption now, you're given a form, and you get to say all the things that work for you, things that don't work for you. You get to choose the gender. Now, you may not always get what you want, but you at least have the opportunity. And so I wanted a Black boy. I was very intentional about that. Black boys are least likely to be adopted then and now. And I have grown up with so many really cool Black guys who grew up to be great men. And I just didn't see, where and why. There was so much stigma, so much negative stigma around Black boys, that they are, somehow more violent, or somehow uneducatable, and just somehow just the lowest common denominator, something to be feared. And I totally disagreed with that, then and now. And I wanted to make a difference, definitely, in that space. And so I get my little boy, I got my wish. I got my 6-month-old Black son, and we were just motoring along doing our thing. And it was great. It was hard, of course, but it was wonderful and beautiful. Certainly exceeded my expectations of what it meant to be a mom and to be a mother of a boy, and a Black boy at that. But it all came sort of kind of crashing down with the murder of Trayvon Martin, because it finally dawned on me that, oh, wow, this could be, your life. This could be, your friends who have Black sons. This could be any of us at any moment. And it was upsetting, definitely maddening, and certainly fearful. But I think more than anything, what it brought out in me was like this hyper sense of protection. Like, I really have to protect him, not just physically, but to protect him emotionally. So that was definitely a mind shift I wasn't expecting.
Well, and when you talk about like protecting him emotionally, it felt to me, at least, like reading the book, that it was also like a forced loss of innocence early, in a way, right? So I just love quotes from your book, so I'm going to read another one. I have to. that you had to say to him when he was 5 years old that some people will think just because you are a Black boy, if you are not smart and funny, they will not care how much you love Elmo or how you got angry when you found out Pluto was a dwarf planet. And that just was like, oh, I felt just like, I mean, 5 years old, right? Like, that's so young.
It was a gut punch for both of us because I had to tell him there was no keeping it from him. And I began to recognize luxuries that mothers of white children had that I did not have. I no longer had the luxury to kind of delay certain conversations. And so it was very important that he understood that while I thought that, he was fantastic and amazing and smart and all these really cool things, that there would be people who would view him negatively and treat him accordingly just because the color of his skin, something that he had not done anything wrong. And it's just by, almost accidental birth that his experiences would be different from his classmates. And so at the time I had just enrolled him. I think he was maybe about 6, 7 months into his private school, and he eventually graduated from that school, from middle school. But most of his were white, and one of his best friends, and they're still very tight today, white, and just beginning to notice the difference in the treatment between the kids in this amazing school. And so it never let up. And so I really had to be a presence and a force for good on his behalf, and really kind of balance, like, this is how you behave when you're out in the world. So if we go to the store, like, you can't touch the stuff in the store because you will get accused of stealing, whereas, Jacob won't. And, that's hard on a kid. It's hard on a parent to have to say those things, but it definitely was just in the spirit of minimizing, any negative experiences that he would have, especially with white adults and authority.
I'm just thinking, like, as a mom, first I can hear, a mom of a teenage girl. I hear a lot when I try to say, let's talk about how people might see you in public and, what you might choose to wear or not wear. And those conversations are really hard, right? And often met with a lot of resistance, right? It's like, you're like, I don't want to have this tension, right? But I'm just thinking, for you, that started when he was 5 or 6. I'm talking like, 13, 14. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you work through that?
Yeah, sure. I see it as an act of love. I mean, I'm not trying to hurt him. And I've made that very clear to him. Like, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I definitely never ever didn't want to steal his joy. It was really just sort of pulling the wool off of, in this country, this is how you will be perceived. And so, as a Black person, as a Black male, and he was tall for his age as a little kid, and he's still tall, you are not seen as cute anymore. So the things that you do won't be considered cute, and you're not going to get a pass. And he just needed, I don't know how well he understood it. He's still a kid, 5, 6,
Yeah.
what have you, but I still needed to let him know. And the thing is, for parents of Black children, that's not a conversation that we have every single day. And so it's not like an indoctrination or anything. Like I said, it's an act of love to prepare our kids just to arm themselves in the world so that they know that no matter where they go, home is always a safe place. You always have a safe space here, just in case there are spaces in the world where he may not have felt safe. And so I didn't get any pushback because, again, he was little. And as he got older, he's pretty mild mannered kid anyway, but he took it in. He definitely, and there were so many things that continued to happen, though, just to prove my point. I mean, Tamir Rice, and then as he got to be older, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, that broke him because by then he was a teenager and he understood what I meant.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like the difference between the conversation, like the experience in the conversations when he
Well,
is.
so during the racial reckoning of 2020, I think that was probably the first time he was able to put what I had been telling him into practice, so to speak, where he, I think, maybe saw himself as, oh, I, in some respects, am a walking target. By virtue of being a Black boy, I am a walking target. And it definitely scared him. So in Los Angeles, where we live, there weren't any riots necessarily, but there were curfews, and the curfews scared him, as they should, because he's 13, but he's still a kid. And so we had to have like a lot of conversations, and it brought about anxiety for him, because he felt, and he told me, he goes, I feel my mortality. How heartbreaking is that? We're eating dinner, and my 13-year-old to tell me that that's how he felt. I was devastated to hear that. Yeah. And really having to talk him through as best I could, because I don't know exactly how he was feeling, though I had a sense of it. And you know, he's 16 now and seems to have kind of moved through it, but those were very tough times, definitely very painful times for parents. And I mean, just in the news lately, the things that have happened, it's awful. It's awful.
How do you think your experience is different or not different than other mothers of, well, we're talking a lot about Black sons because your first book was about that, but Black sons and daughters, how it's similar being a single woman by choice versus other, you know, arrangements where you're also raising Black sons and daughters.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that are very common. So, okay, you talk about your daughter, talking to her about what, you know, maybe you should reconsider that outfit, that sort of thing. So my daughter is now 10. And the other day, she said, so when I'm 11 or 12, can I wear makeup? No. You know, so that's something all mothers are going to deal with at some point, you know, with their girls, maybe even with their boys, but definitely with their girls. But then there's other things that, you know, differences that come in when you have a child that, when you have children that are in predominantly white spaces, or most of their teachers are white. I think as a Black parent, we go in just kind of like, okay, well, let me see, you know, how the school year is going to go. And when things happen, how will my child be treated? And that's not something I don't think white parents think about. We are thinking about, so when something happens, I always ask, well, who's the other party? You know, so what happened? Because I need to know, you know, did the discipline maybe my child received, did it match the action? And then when, you know, Kenna did it, was she equally disciplined? Was she treated similarly? Did her mom get an email? Did her mom get a phone call? Did her mom have the teacher run over to her and say, oh, I just wanted to let you know? So those are the things, just equity in terms of what's happening in school. So that's I'm sure a major difference between people who have children of color and people who do not. That's the biggest one, I think, for us. And then also just in different spaces like sports and stuff. So wherever we go, again, I told you my son is tall. My daughter is also tall for her age. My son is always asked, do you play basketball? Always. The assumption is because he's a tall Black boy, he plays basketball. And the answer is always no. He does not play basketball. So there's a lot of stereotypes that follow the kids that I know other kids don't get asked those questions.
Yep.
So there, you know, it's not something that keeps us up at night, you know, not, again, something we talk about every single day, but is something that comes up. Okay, we went to see Ariel, Little Mermaid.
Oh yeah, yes. I have not seen it yet, but my teenage daughter got to see it. Okay. I was at home with the little one. She's like, sorry, Mom, I'm going out.
So we saw it and I thought it was great. I thought Halle Bailey, I thought she was beautiful and the whole bit, and my daughter definitely enjoyed it. And just so much vitriol online about, it's like, it's not even a real character. Mermaids are not even real. And
Yeah.
so much hate. So those are other conversations that we have to then turn around and diffuse the hate because the mermaid is black.
Unbelievable.
Difference does it make? It's a mermaid.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about like self-esteem and self-image and our girls looking at themselves in the mirror and feeling beautiful or feeling special, and then you've got a contingent of people. I noticed in the newspaper constant articles about, oh, the movie tanked, the movie tanked. No, it didn't. Disney made their money, but those are never the bold headlines. It was like, oh, it tanked. It was the worst movie ever. And so what does that say to your little girl who's looking up to this girl like, oh my God, she's so beautiful, I'm gonna be like Halle? But then you've got someone else saying, oh no, it was terrible, it was awful.
Yeah, no, that was shocking I mean, I guess it shouldn't in some respects have been shocking to me, but reading some of the stuff online, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a fictional character. It is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, so those are conversations like around images and who gets to be the mermaid, who gets to be the princess. That's what.
I did have to just a funny moment around that was Ashley comes home and she's like, Halle Berry looks amazing, Mom. I mean, it's hard to believe she's your age. I'm like, it's Haley Berry or Haley. I'm getting her name wrong, but I'm like, it's not Halle Berry. She's like, oh, because I was thinking like, wow, they airbrushed her a lot to get her to look that good because she's like your age. It's like, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ashley.
wrong Halle. Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, on a serious note, I was just reading some stuff after she came back because she was like, oh, the movie is amazing. And we were talking about like representation, and then just seeing what was online it was scary, and as scary as like a white mom of a white child, like.
Yeah. So there's definitely some differences.
Yeah.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
So do you think of what, one thing that you talk about in your book, and I feel like, well, I won't say what I feel like first, but it's really that this idea of motherhood being represented as so white, right? Like you go into the parenting section, I guess people don't even go into bookstores anymore, right? But you go on whatever, Amazon, and so many of the parenting books focus on this very white parenting experience, right? Do you think that's changed at all since the book came out in 2019, right? Do you think that's changed at all since then, or?
Okay, so from a literary point of view, no, because every now and then I do pop into the only, well, not the only, but the last sort of freestanding box bookstore is Barnes and Noble, excuse me, at least in Southern California. And I go to the parenting section because I'm always curious to see, one, do they have my book? And if they have it, is it front facing? Is it front facing? I did that wrong. I don't know. It's blurry on my site. Or are you getting the spine?
It's blurry, but we're getting the idea.
And it makes a difference. And what I appreciate about Barnes and Noble is that my book, even I've been in other cities I've checked, it's been front facing. So what's important about that is it lets a parent know, it lets someone who's purchasing a gift for someone know, oh, that's going to be a story that might be different from what you came in here for. And I think that that's fantastic. And we need more of that kind of placement so that when it's Mother's Day or someone's pregnant or someone's considering motherhood, and you can read what to expect when you're expecting, and you can read Tiger Mom, and you can read, Shitty Mom and all these things. And you can also read Motherhood So White because it's a motherhood narrative. And there are some nuances that are different, and it might be information you need, because definitely what we know is that as women get older, even young women, you never know. And you think it's so easy to get pregnant. I think, especially coming up, you just assume when you're ready that your body is going to be ready. And that's not always true. And many people have turned to adoption for a whole bunch of reasons. And as more and more white people adopt Black children and other children of color, they really need to be reading these diverse voices. So there are a few more books out, but I don't believe that from the literary side, it's pushed the way it should be or the way it could be. Same thing with movies, TV shows, that sort of thing. They're, you know, I think we're kind of sort of in the same boat as we were, 4 years ago, 5, 10 years ago, just in terms of representation. Who are the parents that you see on TV? I know The Parent Trap was remade. I think Gabrielle Union was in it, and I saw it, and it was cute.
Yeah.
And so that was cool. I was like, oh, okay. So there's some things, kind of here and there. There's some surprises, but I do think that, it's a huge industry. Parenting is huge, and it's still very much geared towards white women, and not just any white woman, middle class, upper middle class, cisgender, married white women.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So how is that going to change, do you think? Like,
I don't know. I mean, events like this, talking with you definitely is helpful, because you have constituents that I don't have access to. So maybe there'll be people who will watch this later and say, oh, that's a consideration. Speaking with your students annually, that's great. When I am invited to speak to groups that, like, I always look through people's websites and take a look at their guest list, and I'm like, wow, you've interviewed 50 people and no Black people or one Black person. So I think white people have to really weigh in here and have to help us out and invite us, include us in those conversations, because otherwise people kind of go back to their corners. And especially, the fatigue around like race and that sort of thing. Although I wonder, with the murder of the mom last week, what's going to happen? Will there be renewed interest in the fate of Black women and the Olympian who died in childbirth? That's so awful. Sorry, I can't think of her last name. That sort of thing. Horrible. So, but gosh, does it have to be so tragic? Does it have to be so much tragedy to have sustained interest in diverse parenting experiences? But that seems to be the only thing that kind of gets people interested. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I should diversify my palette in terms of what I'm reading in the parenting space. So that didn't answer your question. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And I mean, I have to, like, I'm guilty of it myself in many ways, because we were going through the adoption process, right? And thinking that probably our child would not look like we did. She does, but that was not our expectation, right? So I really went into it trying to read and think about, okay, what would it be like to raise a child who is Black or Latino or Asian and has had, the world will look at them very differently than they look at me, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And how will I raise a child to be safe in an environment like that? But until that moment, I hadn't given as much sort of heartfelt interest in it, right? Until you really think about it as like, wow, this could be like my child could be facing people having all these negative images of him or her just based on skin color, right?
Well, that's because in our country, motherhood is white. So there'd be no reason for you to consider that there would be a perspective that you should take a look into. And I imagine what you found reading my book and perhaps reading others is that we have a whole bunch of stuff in common. And that, there'd be no reason to think about it one way or the other. There's no judgment. It is what it is.
Yeah. Now, we've, since we've known each other for a while, you've spoken about how your first book was kind of about your son and your experience becoming a mom for the first time. And now you will be having a second book coming out shortly around becoming a mom a second time. And, within that experience has been neurodiversity and thinking about supporting a child who has some neurodiverse, needs and what that has been like. So I'm just curious to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, so that was really unexpected to adopt a second child because I had a plan, and the plan was I would pay it forward, adopt a little boy, and then I would get married and have more children. And I wasn't necessarily seeing anyone. And more important, my son started asking for a sibling. He wanted a baby, and I just ignored him. What? What's happening? So, and then he kept asking, and then he got very specific. I want a baby girl. And I was like, oh God, no, I don't want a little girl. That's out. So I didn't want him to be an only child. Things are going great for us. I didn't want him to be an only child. So I caved a little bit, and I signed up with an agency, and I thought, okay, boy, mom, check, I got this. And I had a bunch of his stuff, and I thought, okay, this will be great. We'll get you a sibling. And we end up meeting. His would turn out to be his half sister. I didn't even know about her. And she was already spoken for. She was supposed to be with another family. And it was just like divine intervention. She ended up with us. And so we met her when she was 6 months old. She moved in when she was 10 months old, and now she's 10 and a half. And I'm so happy he made a request for a baby girl, and she really rounds our family out. And I think she deepens our relationship and just makes our family, I don't know, more whole, if that makes sense. And so, we get her and kind of sailing along. And so somewhere around kinder, with one of her teachers who said that, oh, we're having to redirect her a lot. And I was just thinking, oh, well, she's in kindergarten, she's so excited, and she's immature, because in preschool, that's what the teacher said, she was immature. So I thought, well, she's just immature. She's super strong-willed, and she's fun. Oh, these are great skills. She'll be president one day. Like, this is awesome.
Right.
And then when the teacher said, oh, I said, well, how many times a day do you have to redirect her? She's like 50 or 60 times. I'm like, that's excessive. That's a lot. She just cannot sit in her seat, and she's turning cartwheels and running out the room. And I had her assessed, and to ultimately learn that she has ADHD. And I, jumped into action and got her a therapist, and then she went to occupational therapy, and all these things I put in place I was paying cash for. And I thought, this is unsustainable, because it's very expensive. And once I switched to her insurance, it was just like all these like red flags go off. It's like, oh, so as long as I'm on the west side, we have superior care. But when I'm closer to home, we still have good care, but instead of 50 minutes, it's 25 minutes, and it's hard to get a hold to get a therapist. And so I was frustrating, of course. And so there's all these things externally that were happening, just trying to get her squared away, and a whole just sort of, does she take medication? Does she not take medication? That's a big issue in the Black community, because we have a lot of distrust of the medical profession, and we've had good reason. But after 10 months of no meds and trying to do behavioral interventions, ultimately I decided, okay, we'll go with medication. And having a neurologically diverse child, definitely, it just flipped the whole household, just completely different. And I've had to parent very, very differently, and I'm still learning. And she's still teaching me a lot of things, just how to parent her properly. And there is never a dull moment. And all I can say is that she keeps me on my toes. That's for sure.
Well, you look very young. She's keeping you, young, right?
Power of hair color.
So can you talk a little bit about, so you're saying parenting very differently,
Yes.
like what that kind of looks like, and how you realized, sort of what was working and what wasn't? necessarily working.
So, okay, when you've got multiple kids and you've got more than one, so every child is totally different. But I have been parenting one for 6 years, and again, pretty easygoing child. I could tell him to do stuff. I might have to repeat myself once or twice, but he pretty much just followed the rules well. He was a great sleeper, and I really engaged at school, high achieving student, that sort of thing. My daughter, she'd just be like, okay, well, whatever. Just I don't care. Having to, I could tell him something and walk away. With her, I have to stand and make sure it gets done. As simple as getting out of the bed. Oh, I don't feel like it. Oh, I need to stretch, or oh, I need to do this. And so that kind of micromanaging was very, very unexpected, but necessary. Having to create charts for her so that she can develop a level of independence, but still having to itemize, okay, this is what needs to happen in the morning. And learning, I can't give a list of 10 items, 3 things, 3 tasks, constant reminders of, oh, are you on task? Oh, you're off task. Okay, let's get back on task. So that, and then also just the emotions, having really, really big emotions and sometimes really explosive tantrums. And just once they've gone past reason, there's really nothing we could do. So I really had to learn, like, I can't talk to her if she's in the middle of a tantrum, and I can't fix anything. I have to wait for it to pass. And then when she's calm, be able to talk to her. And then sometimes her tantrum really triggers me. And then she's mad, I'm mad. Okay, so now everyone's mad. And having to recognize, like, this isn't helping. I'm not helping. So I'm going to back away from the situation. And so definitely a feeling of being out of control. That's when you're dealing with a person who's neurologically diverse and they have really big emotions. It makes you feel out of control as well. There's nothing you do except just kind of wait it out. And I've always been a very involved parent at school, but the discourse changed. It went from talking about, is the summer reading list going to be diverse? And microaggressions in the classroom, comments that are, so it went from that conversation to, this is who she is, this is what she needs. She's going to need to take a break. Yeah. She's going to, if there's 10 steps, you're going to have to only give her 3 and be okay with the 3 steps. Oh, she can't finish her work, send it home. We will have to do. So the conversation is totally different. And she wants to, an issue for her is she hates it. She's like, I hate being different. And so that hurts. Yeah. No, that's your strength. That's your superpower. You're okay. You're okay. So lots of cheerleading, and it's a ride. That's for sure.
And, something that really, as you were talking, struck me is there's so much out there, right? Especially on like social media, but it's true, right? About the importance of co-regulation and whatnot. But then I think a lot of that assumes that your child has, the self-regulate, whatever, average self-regulatory sort of capacities. And like what that feels like when in your mind is this mantra going through, like, I have to co-regulate, but like, yes. It's just, it's not happening.
It's not happening at all. No, yeah. And all that stuff sounds good. I mean, there's a ton of information out there. You can do this, you can do that, but what works for 2 weeks doesn't work after that. And you're always like changing and trying to figure out, okay, so one of the things we've been working on this past school year has been antecedent, like, okay, when you feel it rising up in your body, use your tools. And she can't always access her tools. So then what do we do? If she can't access them, if she can't say, I need a sip of water, or I'm always like, use your breath, and I can't. And there are times when I try, to breathe with her. And then there are other times when I'm just so annoyed. I have to leave the room and get myself together so then I can come back in and support. I wasn't expecting that, but because she's from the foster care system, I guess I should have, because there's a huge majority of the kids who present with, maybe delays or some type of mental health issue. But because her brother didn't present that way, I thought, oh gosh, I dodged another bullet. Like, we're golden over here. We are winning, and we are winning. It's just a different win. It's just different.
Something like you spoke about earlier about how she kind of made your family whole, right? Or, the dynamic complete or whatever. And I love like family systems theory and all that stuff. So I'm just thinking in my head, like, how does having a child who has their own different sort of needs from your other child impact both your relationship with your son, right, as well as the relationship between your son and your daughter? So it's like there are all these moving parts, right?
Yes, yes. I have had to ask him to grow up a little faster in certain areas, because I've had to ask him to be far more empathetic in a way that if she didn't have ADHD, that I wouldn't have to do that. And I've had to really ask him, like, listen, okay, it's dinner time. You see the time. Don't antagonize her because she's going to explode. Or don't antagonize her because she's going to have the giggles and she can't get through the meal because she's laughing and it's this big uproarious laughs and she can't do it. And then that's going to cause the night to spiral. And then I've also had to be supportive of him because there are things that she does do that's intentional. And I've had to say to her in front of him so he could see, okay, I'm not just punishing you, I'm getting her too, so that he feels very supported, because I definitely can see how and I've had to tell her, you may not suck all of the air out of the room. And it's so true. Squeaky wheel gets the grease, and it is very easy to feel like the calmer child is okay. And so it's easy to, oh, they'll be okay, that sort of thing. And I've really made an effort to circle back to him and say, okay, did you feel supported? Did you hear me take away her privilege? And I'll have her take responsibility and accountability for her actions with him. So again, I feel very involved in their relationship, more so than I think I would have been if she didn't have them.
No, that makes sense. So, I'm thinking, we were talking about how, motherhood so white, right? It's such a white experience that's represented. I would also say that the neurodiverse, being the parent of a neurodiverse child isn't as represented as, having a sort of quote unquote typically developing child. Can you talk a little bit about sort of that intersection as well of being the mother of a Black neurodiverse child and how that you find yourself represented or not?
Right. Certainly from a representation space, I would say no. There are lots of folks on Instagram who have pages and that sort of thing. So I'll check them out. A couple of podcasts I found by Black women, which would be great, because I'm always looking ahead, like, okay, but what's the trajectory? And when she becomes college age or when she's in her 20s or what have you, how did these ladies feel? How did they get through their experience? And a lot of times they weren't diagnosed until later. And so I'm on the earlier end with my daughter's diagnosis. So I'm like, okay, all right, so that's a win there. But what's we're when I say we, I'm talking about Black people. We're so worried about stigma and what it looks like. And what I figured out was, wow, there are so many children who have something going on with them, who are getting treatment and who've been getting treatment. And I I didn't know. And so once again, it feels like a lot of the services are certainly geared towards cash paying people, that's for sure. And at least in LA, again, geography is everything. And so a lot of the sensory rooms, like for kids who have OT, I've seen some really gigantic services and the things that they have that are much bigger than in other areas. And so that's race, it's also socioeconomics for sure. And for children of color, for Black children, Black boys who are neurologically diverse, often they are disciplined first. The discipline occurs, they're rambunctious, they are aggressive, they are angry, they're all these things. And instead of being asked, or someone stepping back and saying, maybe that child is dyslexic and he's cutting up because he can't read. Maybe he needs glasses because he's farsighted and he cannot see the board. It's a huge undocumented issue in the Black community. And so we aren't given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to behavior. It's always the negative versus, oh, wow, maybe something is going on. And I'm definitely very sensitive to it since I've got a child who is neurologically diverse. And so my lens has shifted. And so when I see kids, I think, I think there might be a little something going on. And I wonder if the parents are aware or if the parents have noticed that something might be going on, as opposed to he just won't sit down, or he's got a bad attitude, or she has a bad attitude. Maybe she has a bad attitude because he feels something's going on, but she doesn't have language to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, teacher, I don't feel right. And
It's really hard, or
really hard. And I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to just be.
Yeah. No, I mean, unfortunately, that makes sense. So, as we sort of finish our assembly, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
So through well, you were a fiction writer, right, for a while before you got into the nonfiction world. So sort of thinking about your whole body of work that's out there, what are like the three biggest impacts you want to have through your writing? Because I think it's so, I find your writing so beautiful and so just really you touch a chord, right? So, what are the three, if there were only three, what would the three things be?
The beauty in Black motherhood, excuse me, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging diverse motherhoods. And so I guess number one would be seeing the beauty of Black motherhood. The second thing would be to see the hurt of Black motherhood. We continue to see it with our grown men who are someone's son, being shot through the door, the 12-year-old shot through the door. Oh my God, like how scary is that?
Yeah.
Being shot by police, and it continues. And I feel like if our pain was seen, felt, understood, that there would be less attacks on our children, because that pain is real. Yeah. And the last thing would be the joy of just parenting. Like, we love our children and we want them to grow up and be happy and whole and productive. And we have a lot of joy and laughter and love for our families, for our community, for others. And just recognizing that we, at the end of the day, we want the same thing. Like, we're all on the same team. We're all moms.
Yeah.
We're all on the same team.
I think that's such a nice way to end it. But before we fully end it, where can folks find out more information about your work, your Instagram, all that good stuff?
You can find me mostly Instagram at I am Nefertiti Austin, and Twitter, my favorite spaces. That's at Nefertiti Austin. Facebook to a lesser degree, but I do still have a Facebook page, and that's Facebook at Nefertiti Austin. I also have a website, www.nefertitiaustin.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, as always.
I can't wait to see you in class in September.
Yep, I'll be there.
Oh, good.